I love racing games, especially kart races with elements of combat. And yet, truth be told, my experiences with the series that pretty much kickstarted the whole subgenre were minimal. I mean, I played the SNES original during a sleepover and enjoyed a few multiplayer rounds of 8 Deluxe at some parties while being piss drunk. Other than that... No! Nope. And I'm responsible enough adult not to buy another retro console just to put it on my dirty ass floor. So let's go with I bought Nintendo Online Service. Yeah, sounds good enough. And played Mario Kart 64. A game that became the golden standard for kart races. And you know what? It was kind of great! No wonder that to this day it's kept in such high regard, from the steering to courses and available tools. And sure, it wasn't the first truly three-dimensional combat racer as on PS1. There were games like Polyphony Digital's Motor Toon Grand Prix, or, you know, the greatest video game series of all time, Wipeout. But then again, maybe we should concentrate strictly on karting games, just not the realistic ones, as they tend to really suck. I'm sorry Ayrton, you're one of my idols, but as fun as go-karts are to drive in real life, applying video game physics to them is pain. Anyway, there's a term I tend to use around my friends. Tesco value, as in a cheaper non-brand replacement for the original. Just like I am a Tesco value YouTuber, if there's other stuff to watch, you wouldn't bat an eye. But when there's a dry spell and you want to procrastinate... With how popular Mario Kart was, many other companies and IP holders tried to get their piece of the pie. Most of them were decent, if a bit safe, tries. And honestly, I would say that between the late 90s and early 2000s you couldn't really go all that wrong when it came to this genre. So yeah, Tesco value isn't a completely derogatory term. While it's not the real deal, it still can be just as enjoyable, with Crash Team Racing being considered one of the best, if not even better than its inspiration. But there was a game that outspeeded CTR. Well, technically in some places, and at least in my eyes, beat it in the other aspects as well. In 1994, Norwegian video game developer FunCom set up Ireland-based FunCom Dublin. Their first game, Impact Racing, was an enjoyable vehicular mayhem, but it didn't win any awards or critical recognition, with the amount of copies sold being rather underwhelming. Probably because it was a really mediocre arcade romp that was less about racing itself and more about destroying cars driven by brain-dead drivers, like a 90s adaptation of the classic Spy Hunter. Can't really recommend it as a game, as while fun in short bursts, it was too simple and outdated even for the time of its release. Still, it allowed them to get the necessary experience for their Magnum Opus, Speed Freaks, or Speed Punks as the game is known in the US of A. It always puzzled me why they changed it, but then the internet quickly explained it to me. Yeah, I forgot about the other type of speed. The game was actually so good that it impressed Sony enough for them to make it the poster child for the multi-tap, making a special official bundle. And am I the only person who was disappointed that you plug multi-tap with a cable instead of just attaching it to the console? In Europe, it even got a month head start over the Crash Team Racing, and yet, even though it had the support from Sony and pretty decent marketing for a game of its size, not to mention that critics praised the game into the sky, it was a pretty average seller. Taking over half a year to get the game to the States also didn't help at all. But that doesn't change the fact that the game is amazing, and it will let you know about it even before the gameplay starts, treating you to a beautifully animated intro featuring, and I couldn't believe it too, Moving Without Motion by Jamiroquai. I mean, way to do first impressions! We meet the titular Speed Freaks, a group of delinquent kids who enjoy racing over anything else. The three secret characters also make a brief appearance, but they too will get their proper chance to shine. Also, biting the hand who feeds you is always funny, especially considering the future. And the audio-video delightfulness doesn't end at the intro. Everything from the treehouse where we select our racer, to the tracks and the usable weapons, bombards our senses constantly, in a good way, so prepare for me gushing about it all the time. While each character consists only of a head, torso, hands and feet, stylistic that for a while made me think that the whole gang came from the hand of Michel Ancel. And karts as well are just steering wheels, and sometimes exhaustion pipes. And yet it adds a weird charm to the whole picture. Not to mention that it was made from a purely pragmatic reason of not having to animate the joints, saving both time and the console's processing power. Because let me tell you, the tracks in this game look fantastic and are bursting with details at every turn. And that's saying nothing about the utterly brilliant job they did with lighting and water. I mean, I'm sure it came at a cost, even if the game runs smoothly in 50 PAL and 60 FPS, and I've never noticed any slowdown with single instances of pop-in. But the sense of speed provided by the game is immaculate. The game. After picking the mode that is of interest to us, and by that I mean tournament, we can explore Speed Freak's gathering place and choose a racer or racers, as Buster and Wedgie race as a duo. Sadly, all their backstories are exclusive to the manual, so all we get to know about them from playing the game is what we've seen from the intro, their little corners of the secret base, their reactions to being selected or rejected, and behavior on track. The PAL version doesn't even have measurable stats when picking characters, forcing you, again, to look into that pesky manual. There are 3 weight classes. Well, Buster and Wedgie are listed as very heavy, but it's virtually the same as heavy, which is high top speed, poor recovery from being hit and collisions, low acceleration and turning ability. Perfect for stages that allow you to achieve and keep great speed by the use of long straights, and numerous boost pads. Lightweight class is the complete opposite, extremely high maneuverability, acceleration and recovery at the cost of lower top speed. Much more suited for tracks with multiple slow corners. And then there's medium, which is terrible at everything. Seriously, trying to be decent at everything in this game will get you nowhere. So I'm sorry for Monty's mains or Monica's admirers.
She's like 10, you sick fuck.
And you've probably noticed something that might seem weird. Yes, initially there are only 6 races to choose from, and yes, tracks allow only for 6 karts to be present. Quite unusual thing that Mario Kart 64 or CTR both rolled with an 8. But then again, many 3D racing games limited themselves to 6 races. If I had to bet on the reason why, I would definitely go with 2 more races at this fidelity and framerate would fry the PS1. But actually I can see one other reason. But that's for later. Other than the original members of the Speed Freak'd gang, there are also 3 unlockable honorary ones that require quite a lot of hassle to get. They are all unfair when you compare them to the original kids, by the way. After picking our kid, I had to go with Tempest. I mean, he's a cool rebel guy and was marketed as if he were a main character. We are forced to do the easy tournament. Medium and hard are locked and so are their stages. So you can't just play them in time trial or single race until you finish at least third on them in the tournament mode. And that's correct, your math is right. There are only 12 tracks. Well, there is an additional set of 12, but that's complicated. For someone unfamiliar with the game, it may seem like there's a problem with a lack of content and the possibility of being done with everything in little more than an hour. But buddy, believe me, they went all in with quality over quantity and unlocking everything on the first try. Yeah, heavy wishful thinking there. There was a moment in my life when I was so optimistic too. The loading times are a bit annoying, but they are nothing above the average. So we wait a second and yeah, beautiful, isn't it? If you step on the gas at the right moment during the starting procedure, you'll receive a boost depending on how close you were to the sweet spot. But during the tournament races, it isn't all that important. Don't worry, you'll learn the timings sooner or later. Believe me. The first thing you'll notice, other than how gorgeous this world is, god damn, is that the KART controls differently than in the other games. It's more, how do I put it, weighty and slippery? But not in a bad way. I know it will sound utterly ridiculous seeing how the game looks, but it just feels more realistic. Seriously, it's like a happy medium between usual mascot races and those unfun kart racing simulators. Driving in Speed Freaks requires more attention and careful management of speed and turning. For example, going into a sharper turn with full speed and not using a slide technique will cause you to burn rubber and lose a lot more speed than you should, which you then need to regain. Also, spinning out while turning, especially if you're in the air or were hit by a weapon, is really easy if you're not careful. Different surfaces also affect your driving. mostly by reducing your speed, but you'll most likely be in for a nasty surprise when it comes to turning too. To achieve great results, you'll have to master the power slide, performed by pressing either L1 or R1 while turning. I wish that L1 would be exclusive to turning left, while R1 was bound to the right, like it is in many different games, but I guess I'm just too spoiled. Power sliding allows you to make impressive turns while conserving most of the speed. It isn't an automatic get free out of jail card, as there are turns where you're required to brake if you don't want to completely leave the track. But 90% of the time it will do the job marvelously. Not to mention that it is a useful tool while dodging the enemy fire. It also feels really good, even if it doesn't grant you any boost after you're done. Speaking of boost, it's another thing that deserves its own section of the video. In the upper right corner, there's a bar that fills up as you collect boost tokens that are generously peppered around the track. Each track has at least one full boost token, although they are placed in spots that demand taking a bit of a risk from the player. By pressing and holding R2, you can use boost for as long as you need. Well, until the bar is gone, that is. Maxing out the boost bar will get you an extra oomph, not only lasting more than if it were used in short bursts, but also further increasing its power. Most of the time you'll want to use it at full power to reap the most benefits. But you shouldn't limit yourself to just that, like using boost to compensate for off-roading during some shortcuts, going in for an important overtake, making dodging maneuvers, or just recovering lost speed after being hit by an enemy. Finally, I know it will sound weird, but sometimes powered up boosts can cause more trouble than good, making you lose control and wasting time instead. And you still can collect tokens during boosting, and they will extend your run. And yes, if you manage to fill out the bar completely, again, while boosting, the boost will once more receive the powered up benefits. You can, albeit quite rarely, receive usable full boost recharge from an item box, allowing for an instant refill during boosting. Just be sure to use up most of your boost gauge before refueling and don't misclick. If one is careful and precise and has a bit of luck with item pickups and other races, it is possible to keep boosting for the whole lap length. Making boost a resource that the player can use as they please is so simple and yet completely brilliant, opening nearly infinite possibilities and making racing in Speed Freaks a lot more strategic. Building up your energy reserves and making use of them at just the right moment is extremely satisfying. And believe me, by playing the game smart, you're able to get up from even the most dire straits. Honestly, I prefer this limited by resource approach to the potentially infinite mini boosts from Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing. They are great and reward skillful play, but it always felt a bit mindless and tiring that you had to abuse these mechanics when you wanted to get results and divided you and your less skilled friends during the casual play. Resource-based boosting feels more fair, and yet still requires skill to grab these tokens. I, myself, am pretty skilled at dodging them, quite uncannily so. And it also can goad you into making some foolish decisions to get more of it, even if you don't really need it. You should be worried that there's no jump button, which makes getting through some shortcuts more difficult. You pretty much have to be at the right speed and angle when driving through an elevated surface. Controls during such flights are heavily limited too, so have that in mind. I didn't really enjoy the airtime, but some tracks require it. It's definitely one of the more wonky aspects of the game, but honestly, outside of maybe 2 tracks, it isn't used all that much. So yeah, going fast in this game is one of those divine pleasures that one simply has to experience during their career as a gamer. It's just that good. Imagine yourself getting comfortable during your first race, maneuvering with ease, zooming closer to the lead while enjoying the feel of speed, when suddenly you hear a sound you never heard before. And then your muscles jolt and stiffen as a wave of rainbow electricity goes through your body. You're stunned, blind, and unable to do anything other than being passed by others. Speed Freak'd is an arcade kart racer after all, so you'll never have peace while being in front of the pack. Contact with any of these fancy looking cubes will instantly give you a tool that you can use by pressing the L2 button. It's random, although your position and distance between you and your opponents will change the probability of getting certain items. Still, even being in front, you can get the top tier stuff, which will be then of no use to you because you have no one at the front. Most of the available arsenal looks like a pretty standard affair for the genre, but again, there's more than meets the eye, and I'll show that to you with the use of a shitty tier list, in the order in which they are listed in the manual. I've already mentioned the max speed boost, but I'll repeat myself. It's great. With a press of a button, you completely refill your boost gauge, allowing you to catch up to the pack or increase your advantage. The game tends to give it to you once you're behind. If you have ever played a racing game, you know how universally great speed boost power-ups are. Sure, it is a bit boring, but it's always useful. Top of the A tier. Bomb. It's a simple placed weapon. You leave it behind, and if some poor schmuck gets into its detection range, which is visible to everyone, he or she will be launched into the air while spinning. It has a nice stopping power, and AI is really bad at avoiding bombs. Still, remember that your bomb won't know that you're the one who placed it and will treat you the same as the others. It can also be used as a sacrifice to block missiles. If you keep pressing L1 after setting up the bomb, you'll be able to detonate it manually. Don't ask me why you would like to do that. They are okay, but a bit forgettable. I don't think a bomb ever positively changed any of my races. C tier. A weapon that 90% of the player base probably never saw, other than in the manual or in magazines. Remote bomb drops a normal bomb somewhere in front of the person who is in the first place. It's exclusive to multiplayer and I don't really know why. Perhaps they were worried that it would be really annoying for the players, but it really isn't. You can easily dodge it and it's fun to do so. No blue shell level bullshit makes it really puzzling. Too bad, I could see it being a strong B. Basic missile is a really straightforward weapon. After firing, it travels fairly quickly in a straight line until it hits something. There are no ricochet though. Of course, it works best when the enemy is directly in front or behind you, because you can shoot this weapon backwards if you press down with L2. It can also be used to destroy other weapons like missiles or bombs. It can be especially helpful when chased by a homing missile. Racer hit with basic missile acts. Weirdly, the weapon launches target into the air and makes them spin, but sometimes only minimally lowering their momentum. Still, it is a really versatile weapon, which is nice since it's definitely the most common one. It can also be picked up in sets of 3. Sniping a distant target with one of these is immensely satisfying. C tier. Basic missile can also come in the form of a much less common single salvo of 3. It works exactly the same as with the singular one, but, well, there are 3 of them, which makes it a lot easier to hit a target. And because each missile is a separate object, you can hit multiple targets. It's definitely much more reliable, and it feels good to pick it up. B tier. Look at this thing. Mwah. And believe it or not, it is as mean as it looks. After firing, homing missile will seek the next racer in front of you. And it's very persistent and fast. Sure, you can launch it for it to just hit the wall, but it's rather rare, and it tends to navigate the track smartly. If you are in its sight, which you'll know of because of the reticule around your character, you can try making a lot of short, fast slides. Sometimes it's enough for a dodge. At least it's worth a try. And remember that this weapon homes in at the next position and not a concrete racer. If you manage to overtake some other schmuck before the missile gets to you, its target will switch to them. The same goes if, for whatever reason, you'll disappear from track, which sometimes makes the weapon helpful to you, as it will take out the opposition. I'm not even going to try not praising this weapon. It's reliable, strong, and always great to have, even when in front. Sure, it can be blocked by a missile or a bomb, but how often that will happen? And sometimes, very rarely, they come in sets of 3. Yeah, you can't fire them backwards, unless you'll get creative, that is. I lied. Sorry Max Speed Boost. Homing Missile is the actual king of A tier. As a kid, I loved using machine gun. I still think of it as a weapon that is very fun to use. One that conceptually is brilliant. Sadly, it's very underwhelming when it comes to results. While it is in your inventory, if another racer is in front of you, then a targeting reticule will be put around them while a constant sound plays. Pressing L2 will cause you to fire a salvo of 8 rounds in the chosen direction, because, of course, you can fire it backwards. If you score 4 hits, the target will be slowed down, but it won't be anything major. In theory, I think you could spin out another racer with it, but it's not likely. Also, come on, it takes 4 hits. It could be just pictured by bursting 4 tires. D tier, but I'm doing that with a really heavy heart. The most iconic and dreaded power-up in the game. The sound it makes and the visuals have been burned into my mind for at least 24 years now. Hearing it being activated each time causes me to go rapidly through all stages of grief. Though no matter how many shockwaves I get hit by, it's always the same pain. Why is it painful? It's extremely fast. It hits you 99% of the time. When it hits, it stops you completely in your tracks, and to add salt to the wound, it completely zeroes your boost gauge and deletes your weapon if you had one. You can dodge it, but it's really theoretical most of the time. Shockwave isn't a wall, it's a physical object that travels through the center of the track and can be dodged when off-roading or going through a shortcut. It feels good when you get it from the box and use it immediately, but sometimes there's that feeling that you didn't use it to its full potential. If you're really behind, it may not even reach the people in front, thus increasing their advantage, because shockwave travels only a certain distance before dissipating. You can't shoot it backwards, naturally. If you have shockwave in your inventory while in front, and you have a big advantage and want to do the ultimate disrespect, just turn around and launch it. You can do the same with homing missile, by the way. As great as it is, it's still just an A tier. It makes a funny sound, has a really nice color, and sometimes can be found in sets of 3. That's the nicest thing I can say about slime. You drop it behind yourself, me and my mom called it shitting yourself, and anyone who'll drive through it will slide for a bit and slow down unnoticeably. At least it stays for a while on track and multiple people can drive through it. Oh, and it can't be removed by other weapons, and because of that, it is also unable to be used as a weapon blocker. Pathetic. The worst pickup. Also known as 12 seconds of peace. And it's priceless, especially if you're in front. Seriously, being able to just concentrate on racing is liberating. Or you can simply wait for a sound/visual cue of a scare weapon like the shockwave to protect yourself from it. Stealth mode doesn't increase your speed, but comes with the additional benefit of being able to go through the other racers, causing them to spin out and stealing their boost gauge. If both you and the other racer are in stealth, you can safely pass each other by. Visually, stealth is really impressive too. It's an easy S rank. Seriously, it's that good. But not as good as tire pop. At the press of the button, everyone's tires start inflating, ending with them exploding, stopping every opponent who isn't in stealth mode. It's scary when it is used against you, but if you keep your cool, then you can get out of it unscathed by rapidly pressing X. It doesn't always work, and in turn you can get worse results than if you just accepted your fate. It's original, thematic, looks great, and is simply universally good. I can't really say anything else. Oh, and one more cool thing about pickups in Speed Freaks. If you drive into an item box while already having an item, the game will show you what would you get. And if you'll use your current weapon fast enough, you'll get that new one instantly. It allows you to make a decision whether you want to keep your current weapon for a better occasion, or is the potential new toy worth using it now. Great stuff! Each lap has multiple opportunities to get weapons thanks to how many item boxes each track has. And believe me, your opponents will constantly abuse it, creating an unending loop of pain. This makes me think that they limited it to 6 racers, because any more would make everything utterly insane. If we forget about how much it would strain the PlayStation's guts. There are 4 teams when it comes to the tracks. Seaside Raceway, which is the most basic and relaxed, featuring lots of water. City circuits, with speedways and narrow alleys, with one really big shortcut per track. Stadiums with dirt, ramps and hoops. being the most technically difficult set of levels, and finally the most varied of all island courses, where you actually can die by melting in lava. Tracks are fairly short. The less complex ones have a lap time below 30 seconds, but the game compensates this by making every race have 5 laps instead of 3. Again, quite an ingenious idea. I have to admit it, having shorter but more numerous laps hits differently. It makes races feel even faster, while at the same time giving you more chances to rise up from a bad position, or to lose it all. Be aware though, later tracks do get longer and with more tricky set pieces, eventually making the races go for 5 or more minutes, and yet it doesn't feel tiring at all. Unless you get sabotaged by everyone at the track at the last possible lap. And then again, and again, and again. Tournament mode consists of 4 stages in a row, and you get points depending on your placement at the end of each race, so you don't have to win every race to win it all. As long as you don't place outside the podium, because that's a no-go and you'll get disqualified, having to repeat the whole thing from the first race if you don't have any retries left. Yeah, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me either. You get 2 race restarts for one tournament though, so you can retry it if it doesn't go your way. Winning a tournament is not a big deal, but if you want to unlock everything, especially the trio of secret characters, you'll have to do the tournament perfectly by getting first place in each of the 4 races. And with how frantic the game can be, you can do wonderfully through all of the tournament and then get screwed on the last race of the series constantly, forcing you to restart over and over. Yeah, the hard tournament took me a lot. So, to the person who decided to put Sunset Isle as the final track of the hard tournament. Wypierdalaj. I know that it's mostly a skill issue, but having to repeat the whole, quite tricky tournament just to get screwed at the last possible moment, and doing that at least 8 different times, wasn't the best for my mental health. Oh well, at least I got kinda good at the remaining stages.
Are you sure about that?
After dominating a tournament by taking first place on every track, as soon as the podium ceremony ends, they are pretty fun to watch and are a reward by themselves. The player will be challenged by a secret character to a 1v1 race on the track of their choice. No items, driving skills only. Every bonus character, starting with Monty's dog, Cosworth, has much better overall stats than any of the initial freaks, and it shows when you have to catch up to them. No weapons means that the only thing you have are your skills at driving and collecting boost tokens, being smart about racing lines and when to boost, and how to cheat by abusing shortcuts each lap. The characters know about the shortcuts as they use them in the final lap of the challenge, often taking you by surprise, so I think that's a fair game. The challenges are, well, challenging, but also really fun. Seriously, by the end of the game, I wished that there was a challenge for every stage, outside of Sunset Isle and Drift Arena, as they really make you learn the track by heart and demand consistency. Sure, there are basically glorified time trials with the characters being pre-programmed to adhere to a racing line, using boost at concrete times, and using a shortcut during the final lap. But it works! It gives you someone to beat, a motivator. It's much better than the time trials we can access from the menu, where there aren't even developers' ghosts available to the player, forcing you to race against your own times, which is boring. Seriously, guys, giving us just 3 times, bronze, silver and gold for each track wouldn't be too hard, and yet there would be something more to do. Otherwise, it's just a dead mode, pretty much. Anyway, Cosworth is, in my opinion, the best character in the game. He is light, with great recovery, and with how hectic this game is, it's perhaps the most important stat during normal races. And maneuverability, while his top speed is on par with standard heavy characters. And come on, he's an adorable dog in racing goggles who is driving a kart. The second challenger is the exchange student from Japan, Tetsuo, whose original kart was stolen by Tempest. He is a heavy character, but with a really higher than any other characters, acceleration stat, when other heavies are stuck with a terrible one. Still, his poor recovery stat and weak turns prevent him from being completely OP. He is a joy to play by being a complete maniac on the road though. I mean, look at all these reactions. He was also much easier to beat than Cosworth, but I would say it was mostly because I was using the best boy, and that the stage where his challenge takes place is much less irritating than Millennium Park. I like Tetsuo. I mained him when I originally played the game over 2 decades ago. And finally, for getting all the golds on hard tracks during a tournament. There's the brain's ultimate creation, prototype robot racer known as Beamer. Back in the times of the game's original release, he was quite infamous for how difficult his challenge was, with players sending desperate letters about being unable to beat the robot racer. Even the official Polish magazine got a few letters about it, and they tried to guide poor sods through the challenge in text form, and I had that in my memory when trying to challenge him for the first time, over 20 years later. If you never properly learned how to do a boosted start, you will, because Beamer always does a perfect start, getting a big advantage. It serves as a really nice introduction to things to come. When it comes to the perfect start on this track, I actually prefer to do well but not perfect. Perfect is just too powerful and makes doing that turn without losing speed much harder than with an excellent or great start. If you do well, there's a possibility of you even coming in front of Beamer. Grand Rapids could be called the Monaco of this game. It's a really demanding course, full of tricky little turns that at some point can end up with you in the water. And also it's one of the longest tracks. If you keep to the main racing line, that is, it's full of shortcuts that can drastically reduce your lap time. If you manage to pull them off consistently, that is. And imagine my shock when I've noticed that Beamer uses kind of a goofy racing line that isn't all that optimized, and he wasn't even all that super fast. And that I managed to keep up with him. Hell, I even overtook him a few times. I was getting confident, patting myself on the back for being much better than all those people who, with tears in their eyes, wrote letters to magazines. And then, during the second lap, Beamer took his position back and easily kept me at the safe distance, going for a much better racing line, even doing with ease that tricky, important shortcut by the end. I've seen Beamer during lap 3 only for a short while, only at its beginning. But it was enough for me to realize something I hadn't before. during the first 2 laps. Beemer, outside of the start, has not boosted at all. Well, he did that during most of the 3rd lap while driving nearly the most optimal line. Beemer did something I've never seen before in a game. Beemer was sandbagging. It blew my mind. That little piece of shit gave me hope during the whole first lap, filling me with smugness and making me less attentive to him, causing me to relax. Then, for the entirety of lap 2, he was boiling me like a frog, improving and getting faster to minimize the handicap from lap 1, while making me doubt myself and my skills. Finally, for lap 3, he completely throws his mask away and shows his true potential, humiliating me by finishing whole seconds before me. It was a truly humbling experience, but one that also raises the flames of ambition in one's heart. Defeating Beemer is not an easy task and requires mastering of every single segment of the track, and then pulling it out successfully on each lap. Stop thinking about Beemer and just concentrate on driving the perfect line, constantly improving. I know it's hard when he is still a physical object and can push you around, but really, once you focus on simply driving and stop looking at Beemer's position constantly, you'll start doing much better. It may take a few sessions. If you notice a drop in your performance, just call it a day and try again later. It may take a while, but eventually all will just fall into place. And thus, humanity prevails. Beemer is now unlocked and he has maxed out acceleration and top speed, which explains a lot, but for whatever reason they've made him another heavy character instead medium. I mean, in the alpha version he was classified as medium, but they've changed their minds, I guess. And thus mediums get hit with the shortest end of the stick. And Beemer is just a better Tetsuo. Were they worried he would be too OP? That was kind of the point of him, no? At least you can literally T-pose on your opponents with him. Getting all characters, you should also unlock the Golden Wheels mode, which increases speed and difficulty of the game. There are no further rewards for finishing tournaments in this mode. It's strictly for fun. Oh, by the way, there are 12 additional tracks for you to race on, but only in versus mode or time trial, no bots there. Why? I don't know, they've probably just had no money or time to program AI for these tracks, and that's really sad. As while they are certainly less detailed than any of the standard tracks, they still have some interesting ideas put in. I mean, I would kill for a proper, really simple oval stage where it's all about zooming and exchanging the blows. They are a nice fit for multiplayer though, seeing that they aren't too overwhelming. Multiplayer was split into 2 modes: Versus for 1 vs 1 duels, and Multiplayer, which shows up when the multitap is attached, allowing for 3 and 4 player sessions. Yeah, they've made 2 separate modes just for that. It's even more confusing as bonus tracks are accessed through a bonus versus mode, yet it also allows for playing with 3 and 4 players. A truly curious design. If you manage to convince someone to play this old-ass PS1 game with you, you'll have a complete blast, and they will be eternally grateful to you. Believe me. You know why this game is so dear to me? It's not only because it's a bloody good game, and in my opinion it's the best of its kind to this day, but also because it was the game of choice when I wanted to play something together with my mom. There was a point where each Friday evening, before I had to take a bath and go to sleep, she would play a few rounds with me. We nearly exclusively played the stages from the easy tournament because the later ones felt too overly complicated to enjoy. It was just casual fun. And even if my mom was playing games only occasionally, and then they were puzzle games, she could toss me a challenge and manage to win from time to time. But there is a thing that I'm still ashamed of, and that still haunts me during some sleepless nights. Mom, I'm sorry that when you managed to get tire pop from an item box and I was still in stealth mode, I reached for your controller and pressed L2 to waste it. I remember your glare and could feel the regret of having to push me out of yourself and dealing with me for all that time just for me to backstab you like that. I'll be living with the guilt of it till the end of my days. The thing about the version I've played was that it was an alpha version of the game, and it was very, very rough. It was on a pirate compilation disc featuring 3 other games that I would probably never checked out if they weren't included. But the contents of the disc are a story for another time. Sadly, I didn't manage to find that alpha version, and it's probably lost to time. But I'll tell you about the experience. There weren't any FMVs, the menus were really generic, and the whole treehouse gimmick was gone. Character select was bare bones, again no stats other than weight, and every character was available from the start. Some of them also had different names, including Beemer, who was SUD5 back then. And see? Medium! Gameplay wise, the boxes were different. You could see this design during the game's gameplay trailer. I like this more than the ones that we got in the final game. They just look friendlier. Boost bar looks a lot more generic and weapons use placeholder icons. Some of them are really funny. The final ones are much better though. Many tracks were redesigned in the final version and looked different back then, including the use of real-life advertisements. Oh, and there was no power sliding, instead giving players these weird side jumps. As interesting as they were, I'm glad that they were replaced by power slide. They were really wonky and I remember not using them at all. Overall, it was just that, a really early but playable version of the game. What was funny is the fact that many Polish magazines, not the official one, which was basically a copy of the UK version, used materials grabbed from that alpha version, which seems kinda shady. And yet, people praised it to the heavens. To be honest, I myself found it amazing back then, even if it felt odd after playing the demo version. But I can hear you say, Chodyna, if Speed Freak'd is so good, why isn't there Speed Freak'd 2? Well, there was a sequel in the making, at least according to people who worked on the original. They even planned snow rally-like tracks and courses inside a theme park, but one thing was the fact that PS1 wasn't a new cool toy anymore and was being replaced by PS2. The other was FunCom's vision for the company. Basically, they thought that online multiplayer games would be more successful for them, and there's no reason for a single player game division. Sounds familiar. Then again, they've made Anarchy Online, Age of Conan and The Secret World, so maybe they were onto something. Still, I'll never forgive them for scrapping the sequel. After only 4 games, Impact Racing, Speed Freak'd, and 2 motocross titles featuring Ricky Carmichael, FunCom Dublin closed its door in 2001. As I've said, Speed Punks were released in the United States after nearly 8 months. Was it worth the wait? I would say so. NTSC version was even prettier, AI got even better, and yeah, Beamer challenge also got even harder now, and controls are smoother. Minor upgrades, but they are nice. The game sold better overseas, which kind of makes me ashamed of Europe. Speed Freak'd were never released in Japan, sadly. Another reason to mourn the fact that FunCom Dublin only had 4 games, and then both of their Ricky Carmichael's motocross escapades used only licensed soundtrack, is the fact that their composer, Martin Schuller, was cooking. Through this video you got to listen through most, if not all, of this game's soundtrack, and I would suggest giving it a listen once more, but without me yapping. Trust me, it's that good. From the delicate, soothing sounds of main menu, triumphant victory music, and every signature track of the 4 race teams, the crown jewel of the soundtrack is obviously the challenge. It carries over the unique style that was present in Impact Racing's soundtrack. Seriously, it felt like a mediocre game that was bundled with a great techno music CD. And I think that would be all for Speed Freak'd. Do I recommend it? I mean, look at the video's length. If you're still not sure, just rewind to practically any point and try to listen to my mumbling once more. I was glazing the game practically the whole time, so of course I recommend it. Actually, I double recommend it. Seriously, all these 9 out of 10s were warranted. It's near perfection. Could there be more? Of course! I wouldn't mind an additional tournament consisting of repurposed bonus stages, or an endurance tournament consisting of every stage in a row, because custom tournaments allow only for 7 stages. I'm not sure if I'll ever make a presentation about a better game. Oh, who am I kidding?